The loan officer stopped halfway through our refinance meeting and asked my wife why she had left a second real estate loan off the application. Natalie said, "What second loan?" Dana turned her monitor toward us. The credit report showed a $1,842 monthly mortgage payment opened 8 years earlier under Natalie Elise Mercer, my wife's maiden name. A verification note tied the account to a townhouse in Cincinnati, a city Natalie visited several days each month for hospital software projects. I had never seen the address. By the end of that evening, a public deed would tell me the rest. Natalie owned half the townhouse with a man named Julian Cross, and the loan we were requesting against our home was almost exactly what their home needed. My name is Eric Lawson. I was 43, a facilities supervisor for a public high school district outside Indianapolis. Natalie was 40 and implemented scheduling software for hospital systems across 3 states. We had been married 11 years, had no children, and lived in a brick ranch house we bought 6 months after our wedding. The refinance was supposed to be boring. Our roof had reached the point where every spring storm sent me into the attic with a flashlight. My father's knees were getting worse, and we wanted to convert the back room into a bedroom with an accessible bathroom so he could stay with us after surgery. We were applying for a cash-out refinance that would replace the roof, cover the renovation, and leave a small emergency reserve. Natalie had organized the application. She gathered pay stubs, tax returns, insurance records, and bank statements into a folder labeled Lawson Home Project. She was the person in our marriage who remembered renewal dates and compared interest rates. I trusted her with paperwork because she never seemed surprised by paperwork. Dana Cho, the loan officer, kept her voice neutral. "This appears on the credit report you both authorized," she said. "I cannot tell you why it was omitted, but underwriting cannot continue until we document it." Natalie leaned toward the monitor. "Mercer is a common name. Maybe the files were merged." Dana pointed to the identifying digits attached to the account. They matched Natalie's, as did the opening date and the Queen City Community Bank balance of just under $173,000. "Could this be a loan you guaranteed for a relative?" Dana asked. Natalie stared at the screen for several seconds, then said, "I helped an old friend qualify for a townhouse. I forgot it's still reported under me." Forgotten was an impossible word for a debt that appeared every month. Dana explained that she would pause the application and send each of us the documents we were legally entitled to receive. She did not accuse Natalie of fraud. She did not tell me what to do. She simply said the undisclosed liability changed our debt-to-income ratio and made the proposed refinance ineligible in its current form. Natalie closed her folder and said we needed time. During the drive home, she kept both hands tight on the wheel. I asked for the old friend's name. "Julian Cross. A college friend," she said. "He went through a divorce and could not qualify a loan. I co-signed before I understood how long it would stay on my report." "You signed the loan 3 years after we married." "I know. Where did the down payment come from?" "His money." "Have you made payments?" "No." "Why didn't this appear when we bought a car 2 years ago?" "The dealership may not have cared because our income was enough." "Why have you never mentioned owning part of a townhouse?" "I do not own it. I guaranteed the mortgage." Dana had used the words other house, but a loan did not necessarily prove title. I held on to that distinction because it offered a smaller explanation. "Then show me the loan documents," I said. Natalie shook her head. "I do not keep 8-year-old paperwork. Call Julian. I am not dragging him into our finances because a lender found an old favor. He is already in our finances." She said I was speaking as if she had stolen money. I said I was speaking as if my wife had carried a 6-figure debt through 8 years of tax returns, car applications, estate planning, and conversations about retirement without mentioning it. At home, Natalie went into her office and closed the door. I sat at the kitchen table with the lender's verification worksheet from the joint application we had both authorized. It listed the creditor, balance, payment, opening date, and the address tied to the mortgage, 918 Willow Bend Court, Cincinnati, Ohio. I did not enter Natalie's private credit account or guess a password. Public county property records were available online. I entered the address into the Hamilton County Auditor's website. The property card loaded with a photograph of a narrow gray townhouse, a small maple tree, and 2 parking spaces. Under owner information, it listed Natalie E. Mercer and Julian Cross, each holding an undivided 50% interest. The deed had been recorded 8 years earlier, 6 weeks before Natalie's first extended Cincinnati implementation project. She had not merely guaranteed a friend's mortgage. She owned half the house. I printed the property card and the recorded deed. When Natalie came into the kitchen 40 minutes later, she had changed from her work blouse into a sweatshirt and tied her hair back. She saw the pages before she sat down. "You searched public records," she said. "Yes. That is invasive. It is a deed anyone can read. You do not know the context. Then give it to me." Natalie said Julian had been more than a college friend. They had dated briefly before she met me. After his divorce, he needed a stable co-borrower to keep his daughter in the same school district. Natalie said she used part of an inheritance from her grandmother for the down payment and considered the townhouse an investment. "Your grandmother died 4 years after this purchase," I said. Her face changed. She had forgotten the date printed in our family Bible and on the memorial card tucked into our hall cabinet. "Then it was savings from before our marriage. We married when you were 29. You told me you had $11,000 in savings, and we used most of it on this house. I had a separate account. How much did you put into Willow Bend?" "I don't remember." "Do you receive rent?" "No." "Do you have a key?" "Probably, somewhere." "When were you last inside?" "Years ago." "Does Julian live there?" "Yes." "Alone?" "His daughter stays with him some weeks." Each answer arrived only after the previous one failed. I asked why a 50% owner who received no rent would assume half a mortgage for 8 years. Natalie said she had made a foolish financial decision and felt ashamed. "That could be true," I said. "It does not explain why you called ownership a merged credit file, then a guarantee, then an investment." She stood and began collecting the pages. I put my hand on the deed, not on her. "These stay with me. You are treating me like a criminal. I am treating the first explanation as false because the next 2 were false." She released the paper and went upstairs. 10 minutes later, I heard a suitcase roll across the bedroom floor. Natalie came down carrying the black bag she used for work trips. She said the Cincinnati hospital deployment had moved up and she needed to leave that night. According to our shared calendar, the trip was scheduled for the following morning. "Are you going to 918 Willow Bend?" I asked. "No." "Then tell me the hotel. The company books it after check-in." That was not how her travel worked. Her hotel confirmations usually arrived days in advance and generated calendar invitations. "Call your manager in front of me," I said, then immediately regretted the demand. Her employer was not a courtroom, and I had no right to make a supervisor referee our marriage. I corrected myself. "No. Forget that. You do not have to prove a work assignment to me on command. But I am not going to pretend this explanation fits." Natalie said, "I need space from this. You are free to leave. I need to know whether you are going to the house you said you have not entered in years." She looked toward the suitcase instead of answering. "Julian keeps some boxes for me," she said. "I may stop there." "What boxes?" "Winter clothes. Old college things." "Why are your clothes in a house you do not use?" She opened the front door. "Because every answer I give becomes another accusation." "No. Every answer becomes another address." She left without saying goodbye. I did not follow her car. I did not install anything, open her work computer, or call the hospital system. I watched the taillights turn at the end of our street, then returned to the kitchen. On the refinance worksheet, Natalie had requested $112,000 in cash proceeds. The contractor estimates for the roof, bathroom, and backroom conversion totaled $68,400. I had assumed the difference created a reserve for cost overruns and my father's care. Now I wrote the numbers on a legal pad. $112,000 minus $68,400 left $43,600. I searched the county recorder again and found a recorded modification for Willow Bend. Its payment schedule required a $42,000 lump sum in 6 months. The cash we planned to remove from our home was almost exactly what her other house needed. I slept for less than 2 hours. At 6 the next morning, Natalie texted that she had arrived safely and would call after the hospital kickoff. She did not name a hotel. I replied only that I had paused the refinance and would not authorize new borrowing until the second property and proposed cash use were explained in writing. She answered, "You are overreacting to a financial issue that predates our current plans." I looked at the balloon modification again. It had been signed 11 months earlier, not 8 years earlier, and Natalie's signature appeared beneath Julian's. The issue had not been sleeping in an old file. She had renewed it while we were discussing my father's surgery and the renovation. When Dana's office opened, I withdrew the application. She confirmed Natalie could not borrow against our jointly owned house without my signature and advised me to consult an attorney. My next call was to Priya Shah, a family law attorney recommended by a colleague. I did not ask her to start a divorce. I asked how to protect shared assets while I verified an undisclosed property. Priya told me not to drain accounts, hide money, threaten anyone, or sign anything. She suggested downloading statements from accounts already in my name, preserving the joint refinance documents, and placing transaction alerts on our shared checking and savings accounts. Large transfers still remained possible by either account holder, so she recommended proposing a written temporary agreement if Natalie would cooperate. "Do not move money to scare her," Priya said. "Preserve what you can already access and stop signing until the facts are clear." By noon, I knew our shared accounts were intact, but Natalie's annual bonuses had never entered them. Our tax returns included the income, identifying a private funding channel without yet proving where it led. I emailed Natalie 3 questions. How much money had she contributed to Willow Bend? What was the $112,000 refinance intended to pay? What did Julian believe their relationship was? She answered the first 2 and ignored the third. She estimated contributing $76,000 over 8 years, including down payment, repairs, and loan support. She said the cash-out amount was preliminary and denied promising any of it to the townhouse. She attached no statements. Then she wrote, "Julian knows I am married. Do not contact him." That sentence made contact necessary, but I wanted to do it without trespassing into the house or turning a stranger into a target. Priya reviewed a short letter before I sent it by certified mail to the public property address. I identified myself as Natalie's legal husband, cited the public deed, and asked Julian to contact me if he was willing to compare facts. I promised not to visit the house or write again if he declined. There was no accusation and no photograph. The letter was delivered the next afternoon. Julian emailed 3 hours later. His first line was, "I think one of us has been told a story about the other." We spoke that evening by video after confirming each other's identities with partially covered licenses. Julian Cross was 46, a Cincinnati building inspector, and he sat in the townhouse kitchen with a photograph of Natalie visible on the refrigerator. Then he asked when we had married. 11 years ago in May, I said. He removed his glasses and pressed his fingers against his eyes. "She told me you were her former landlord." I thought I had misheard. Julian explained that Natalie used the name Mercer with him because that was the name under which they met. He believed she worked 4 days a week in Indianapolis and rented a room from an older family friend named Eric who gave her reduced rent in exchange for managing the property during his travel. She told Julian the ring she wore in Indianapolis discouraged clients and was not legal or personal. "Did you never visit here?" I asked. She said the owner did not allow guests, and honestly, our life was here. Why would I drive 2 hours to see a rented room? Julian had met Natalie 9 years earlier at a hospital construction meeting, not in college. His divorce had been final for 3 years by then. They began dating 4 months later and bought Willow Bend 10 months after that. That meant the relationship started roughly 2 years after Natalie and I married. The townhouse was not an old favor for an ex. It was a home they selected as a couple. Julian's daughter, Sophie, had been 7 when Natalie entered their lives and was 15 now. Natalie attended school concerts, helped paint Sophie's room, kept a bicycle in the garage, and served as an approved emergency contact at the orthodontist. She was not there every day. Julian believed her hospital work required 3 nights a week in Indianapolis, occasional weekends, and most federal holidays. Natalie told me Cincinnati projects required the same absences. Our 2 homes had been built from opposite sides of one work calendar. I asked whether Julian and Natalie were engaged. He said no. After his divorce, he did not want another marriage until Sophie finished high school. Natalie said she felt the same. They had discussed living together full-time the following summer, after Sophie's sophomore year and after Natalie ended her Indianapolis contract. Julian used air quotes because he now understood the contract was me. He shared only records he legally owned, the deed, closing papers, insurance declaration, and a joint household account statement. Natalie deposited $800 to $1,500 most months. Julian then showed me his wall calendar. Its blue marks for Natalie's Cincinnati nights matched every implementation, audit, and emergency weekend on our shared calendar. One label appeared 6 times, Mercy Upgrade Overnight Cutover. Those were family weekends at Willow Bend. The upgrade had never existed. I told Julian about the refinance and the $42,000 balloon amount. He went still. 3 months earlier, Natalie had told him she would receive proceeds from the sale of a family property, and could pay the balloon before it came due. She wanted the lump sum paid so they could later renovate the upstairs and make her move permanent. Julian believed the family property belonged to the older landlord. Did she ask you to sign anything? I asked. He said no. She had presented the money as hers to use, not a loan that required my signature and put our home at risk. Julian showed me a Thanksgiving photograph of Natalie beside Sophie in the cream sweater she had packed for an emergency go-live in Dayton. That night, she had sent me a staged hotel work photo during a 20-minute trip upstairs. One household had supplied evidence for the lie told to the other. She is here now, he said. The sentence changed the room around me. Natalie had told me she was at a hospital kickoff. She was upstairs in the house whose existence she had denied. Julian said she arrived late the previous night, upset because the refinance had encountered a problem. She told him I was refusing to sell the family property and might interfere with their plans. He had assumed I was an unreasonable landlord. I asked whether Sophie was home. She was at her mother's until Sunday. That mattered. Neither of us wanted a 15-year-old present for an adult confrontation. Julian said he could walk upstairs and put Natalie on camera. I said no. We had enough to know both stories were false, but not enough to protect our finances or understand what she might do when cornered. We agreed on boundaries. He would redirect his future pay to a new account, leave the existing household balance untouched, and ask his attorney and bank what he could lawfully restrict. I would keep the refinance withdrawn and monitor the accounts already shared with me. Neither of us would enter the other's home, contact employers, post anything, or use Sophie as a messenger. Julian would speak to an attorney about the townhouse. I would continue with Priya. We would exchange only records each of us legally possessed. What do I say when she comes downstairs? He asked. That is your decision, I said. But if you tell her we spoke, she may come here before I am ready. Julian looked toward the stairs. If we wait, she gets another day to adjust both stories, he said. We ended the call without pretending mutual damage had made us friends. 12 minutes later, Natalie called me. Her face appeared on my screen with a blank wall behind her. Did you contact Julian? She asked. Yes. You had no right. I wrote to a co-owner of a debt attached to our refinance. You have destroyed a family that had nothing to do with our marriage. You were the connection between the family and our marriage. She lowered her voice. Sophie is a child. I know. That is why Julian and I agreed not to involve her. Natalie stared at me. She had expected rivalry, threats, maybe 2 men competing for her version. Cooperation removed the space between the stories. Come home tomorrow, I said. Bring records for every dollar connected to Willow Bend. We will speak with Priya present by video. If you will not do that, all further communication can go through counsel. You are making this sound criminal. No. I am making sure the facts do not change again tomorrow. Eric, please. I can explain. Tomorrow at 10. I ended the call. For the first time since Dana turned her screen toward us, Natalie no longer controlled which household received the next piece of information. Natalie arrived at 9:43 the next morning. She parked in the driveway but left her suitcase in the car. Priya joined us by video from her office. She made clear that she represented me, not the marriage, and that Natalie could stop the conversation or obtain her own lawyer at any time. Natalie said she understood. She placed a slim folder on the table. Inside were 11 months of statements from the Willow Bend household account, the balloon modification, and a handwritten estimate of what she believed she had contributed over 8 years. The estimate totaled $89,000, $13,000 more than she had admitted by email. Is this complete? I asked. It is what I could gather overnight. Did you intend to use proceeds from our refinance for Willow Bend? I considered using part of what I viewed as my equity. Without telling me the second house existed. I was going to explain before closing. Dana explained it first. Natalie looked at Priya and said the townhouse was not a marital residence. Priya answered carefully. I am not giving you legal advice. Ownership, debt, and marital classification are questions for counsel and, if necessary, the court. The immediate question is whether Eric can make informed financial decisions. He could not do that with the information you provided. Natalie asked to speak with me alone. Priya reminded me I could end the call if I felt pressured. I said I wanted her to remain. Natalie began with Julian. She said she cared for him and Sophie but had never promised marriage. She described Willow Bend as a place where she could be useful without being watched. Watched by whom? I asked. By you. By the school district people who know us. By neighbors who ask why we do not have children. In Cincinnati, nobody knew what I was supposed to be. They knew what you told them you were. She flinched. At first I thought it would last a few months. Julian was lonely. I was lonely. Then Sophie attached to me, and the house became real. The mortgage made it real before Sophie had time to attach to you. We bought because rent was rising. You bought a home with him 2 years after our wedding. Natalie said our marriage had already become practical and distant. We worked, maintained the house, visited parents, and went to bed tired. With Julian, she felt spontaneous. He asked for her help and noticed when she arrived. I told her those feelings could explain why the second relationship appealed to her. They could not explain 8 years of deeds, account deposits, false work calendars, 2 sets of clothes, and a plan to borrow against our home. I did not plan it for 8 years, she said. I planned the next week. Then the next one. That is still planning. I asked whether there were other partners, properties, identities, debts, or children. She said no. I asked whether anyone helped maintain the story. Natalie's cousin Renee knew she sometimes stayed with Julian but believed I knew and that our marriage was privately open. Her manager knew she occasionally worked remotely from Cincinnati but believed she stayed with a friend. Her mother knew about the townhouse as an investment and had never met Julian. Each person held one harmless-looking fragment. Natalie had not recruited a conspiracy. She had prevented any witness from seeing enough pieces to challenge the whole. Priya asked whether Natalie had ever represented herself as Eric's spouse on financial documents while representing herself as single elsewhere. Natalie said she used Mercer on the deed, insurance, utilities, and school contacts. She used Lawson on taxes, employment, health insurance, and our home. She was legally married only to me. Julian had never been listed as a spouse. There was no second marriage certificate and no forged identity. The deception was relational and financial, not a secret legal marriage. That distinction mattered. The verified betrayal was already serious, I did not need to exaggerate it into a second illegal marriage. Why did you agree to refinance this house? I asked. Natalie said the roof and backroom conversion were real needs. She also believed the cash proceeds represented value she had helped build. Her idea was to use up to $45,000 for the lump sum and related costs at Willow Bend, then rebuild the money from future bonuses. Were you going to tell me before or after the funds moved? She rubbed the edge of the folder. Before closing. You submitted the application without disclosing the debt. If Dana had not found it, what exactly would have forced the conversation? Natalie did not answer. Priya asked whether I wanted to continue. I said yes, but only long enough to decide immediate arrangements. I told Natalie the refinance was cancelled, our shared savings would remain untouched except for ordinary expenses, and I wanted a temporary written agreement requiring mutual consent for transfers above $2,000. I would not prevent her from accessing her salary or personal account. I asked her to stay elsewhere while we determined whether the marriage could continue. Where am I supposed to go? She asked. I do not know. Julian told me not to return. Then stay at a hotel or with Renee. This is my home. Yes. I cannot legally lock you out, and I will not. I am asking, not ordering. Natalie looked around the kitchen as if she had expected one of her homes to remain available after the other closed. Can I have a week? She asked. You can use the guest room for 3 nights while you arrange somewhere else. After that, if we disagree, our attorneys can handle occupancy. Priya reminded both of us that this was a proposed temporary arrangement, not a court order. Natalie signed no agreement that morning. She contacted her own attorney, Melissa Grant, and moved into an extended stay hotel 2 days later under a temporary arrangement both lawyers reviewed. The joint account stayed open for mortgage, utilities, food, and insurance. Our salaries were redirected into separate accounts, with agreed contributions to shared bills. Neither of us emptied anything. The restraint felt small beside the lie, but it kept my response lawful and reversible while the facts were still being sorted. Julian handled his side separately. He told Sophie that Natalie had lied about an important adult relationship and would not be staying at Willow Bend while he decided whether it could continue. He did not tell her every detail. Sophie asked to retrieve a quilt Natalie's mother had made and several books from the upstairs room. Julian arranged the exchange while Sophie was with her mother. Natalie later asked me whether Sophie hated her. That is not information I have or should collect for you, I said. Julian and I exchanged one final set of records through our attorneys. His statements showed Natalie's deposits came from a checking account at a bank I did not recognize. Financial disclosure in the divorce process later identified it as an individual account opened 2 months before the Willow Bend purchase. Natalie's annual bonuses, tax refunds attributable to her extra withholding, mileage reimbursements, and occasional transfers from her mother had flowed into it. The account had funded the townhouse without reducing the fixed amount she deposited into our household each month. That was why our life had never shown a dramatic missing sum. The hidden cost appeared elsewhere: retirement contributions she said she had maximized but had not, vacations she postponed as too expensive, and the years we delayed replacing the roof. I had not been impoverished. I had been making long-term decisions with a budget that omitted an entire house. The formal financial review found no third property, gambling debt, secret child, or additional partner. There were 2 homes and 2 relationships, connected by one concealed account and a fabricated work schedule. The system was large, but it was coherent. I filed for divorce 6 weeks after the refinance meeting. I did not file because Priya told me to or because Julian ended his relationship. I filed after 3 counseling sessions in which Natalie continued to describe the second household as something that grew around her, as though deeds and transfers had signed themselves. In the 4th session, she finally said, I built it because I wanted both lives and believed I could postpone the cost. That was the first complete sentence she gave me. It was also too late to change my decision. Natalie did not contest the affair or the property history, but the financial classification required negotiation. Our lawyers obtained an appraisal for Willow Bend and one for our Indianapolis home. Natalie and Julian each legally owned half the townhouse. Julian wanted to keep it so Sophie would not lose another home. He qualified to refinance the remaining mortgage in his name and offered to buy Natalie's share at the appraised equity value. Natalie accepted after her attorney reviewed the amount. The proceeds did not disappear into my account, nor did she lose everything. They entered the marital balance sheet, where contributions, debts, and property interests could be considered under Indiana law. Our primary house had more equity, but it also needed a roof. I wanted to remain there because my father still needed an accessible place after surgery. We negotiated a settlement under which I refinanced the Indianapolis mortgage in my name at a smaller amount, paid Natalie an equalization sum, and retained the house. Her share of the Willow Bend buyout offset part of what otherwise would have come from our home. The secret property did not make me rich. It prevented a hidden debt from being financed twice. The roof replacement moved ahead using savings and a modest home improvement loan after the divorce settlement, but the backroom conversion had to wait. My father recovered in his own apartment with home health support and teased me that he had never asked for a designer bathroom anyway. I laughed the first time he said it and cried in my truck afterward. The second life had costs that would never appear on a deed. The divorce took 10 months. Natalie rented an apartment between Indianapolis and Cincinnati and kept her job. Neither Julian nor I contacted her employer. Public humiliation would not correct the deed, protect Sophie, or restore the money. Renee apologized after learning that the marriage Natalie had described as open had never been open at all. Natalie's mother called too. She finally understood why Natalie had insisted on calling Willow Bend an investment. The harmless word had allowed her to repeat the cover story without knowing it. I accepted both apologies and asked for space. Julian and I met once at a coffee shop halfway between our cities to compare the last uncertain dates. We avoided intimate details. His calendar confirmed that Natalie had staged most of her hotel calls in Willow Bend's upstairs office, using a blank wall, a folding desk, and a white noise app. When she needed an Indianapolis background for Julian, she called from her car outside a hospital campus where she sometimes worked. No accomplice or hidden apartment was required, ordinary work privacy had covered the distance. Julian asked whether I blamed him. I blamed the man I thought knew about me, I said. That was not you. He admitted there were things he had chosen not to press, no family photographs online, no neighborhood events where someone might recognize her, and no full holiday spent under one roof. Those omissions did not make him responsible for my marriage, but they explained why her answers had survived. When he asked if we should stay in contact, I said no. I did not want Natalie to remain the center of another relationship in my life. We paid separately and left. I never contacted Sophie. She was a child absorbing a loss, not evidence I needed to collect. For months I checked the county property site, waiting for the ownership record to change as if a filing could prove the second life was over. My therapist pointed out that a deed could confirm ownership, not recovery. Priya's office agreed to notify me about filings that affected the settlement, and I stopped searching on my own. The habit left slowly. After the divorce, Natalie requested a meeting. I declined, so she sent a letter through her attorney. She admitted that, dividing herself, was a softer phrase than deceiving two households and apologized without asking for reconciliation. I read it once and filed it with the settlement. Accuracy did not create an obligation to reopen contact. 14 months after Dana stopped our first loan meeting, I applied for a smaller home improvement loan in my name. The roof was already replaced, but I wanted to complete the accessible bathroom before my father's next surgery. I returned to Dana because she had handled the first discovery without gossip, accusation, or false certainty. At our appointment, she reviewed my income, the divorce decree, the new mortgage, and the settlement statement. Then she reached the liabilities page. "Do you own or guarantee debt on any other real estate?" she asked. "No," I said. My credit report listed only the Indianapolis mortgage. The settlement file included a recorded deed showing Julian as Willow Bend's sole owner and a release confirming Natalie had been removed from its loan. Natalie's buyout proceeds were accounted for in our final settlement. The Indianapolis house belonged to me, along with its smaller mortgage, damaged hallway paint, new roof, and unfinished back room. Nothing on the page was mysterious. Dana sent the file to underwriting. I did not feel triumphant. I felt the quiet relief of seeing a number mean only what it said. My father's bathroom was finished that fall. He stayed with me for 6 weeks after knee replacement and complained that the shower bench made him feel 90. On the last morning, he made coffee and asked whether I regretted learning about Willow Bend. There was no version where not knowing protected me, I said. It only protected the plan. He nodded, then asked if I intended to keep living alone. I told him I did not know. For once, not knowing was honest rather than engineered. Julian remained at Willow Bend with Sophie. I knew that only because the property transfer was part of my settlement, not because I followed their lives. Natalie moved again after her lease ended. I did not ask where. There were facts I needed to leave safely and facts that would merely keep me attached to the investigation. Learning the difference became part of ending it. I never recovered a perfect account of every trip or transfer. I no longer needed one. The system had worked because each person held a plausible fragment: work travel for me, an open marriage for Renee, an investment for Natalie's mother, and an Indianapolis contract for Julian. The refinance placed the fragments on one screen. A mortgage led to a deed, the deed led to Julian, his calendar exposed the second household, and the balloon modification showed what Natalie intended to do with our equity. That chain answered the question that mattered, not every sentence she had used, but what I had to protect once the two lives touched the same loan. A year after the divorce, Dana mailed the closing packet for my smaller bathroom loan. The liabilities page showed one house. I signed it in a finished back room and set the packet beside the contractor's plans. For 8 years, documents had helped Natalie keep 2 homes apart. The last one finally described only mine.